I'm sitting down, man. My name's Scott. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank our leader tonight. I'd like to thank Omaha and Omaha AA, some people in particular, Bruce R., John O.H., Mick S., and our hosts, Rob, and his wife, Marilyn. We've been shown just remarkable kindness and generosity. I mean, the fact that I'd be asked anywhere in the United States, anywhere for anything, let alone to speak about alcoholism, is uncanny. That I would wind up in Omaha, Nebraska, feeling totally comfortable, part of the fellowship, and got to hear Joe last night, who gave me a loving note before I got up here. It says, "Don't blank up." Doesn't say blank. Joe's got a heart the size of a chiclet, and thanks, Joe. No nerves. My wife and I were talking after the panels last night, impressed, just incredibly impressed with the quality of sobriety and recovery. The Al-Anon panel this afternoon, some incredible speakers in the AA panel, just a remarkable amount of recovery. And you know, we're the members of what seems to be the most popular club in town these days, and we all know that sometimes we have to fight to keep the identity of AA alive because it starts getting a little diffuse. And all I've heard since I got here are the steps, the big book, and meetings. And I want to tell you, man, it's like music for me. It's amazing how simple things get. It's just great. And you know, if you have other problems, you're welcome here. We don't want to deny anybody recovery from anything. It'd be a good idea to catch alcoholism. That'll help. We have a book for that. You didn't have a book for what I had when I got here, unfortunately, because I didn't know what I had. I didn't have alcoholism when I got here. I don't know what I had. I want to also thank my friends, the Conways, from coming down from Chicago, and my sponsor, Don M., is here from Los Angeles. And I want to thank. And I would like to take a moment of indulgence and ask you to welcome my wife, Nancy, I'm going to ask her to rise, and so you know who she is. Can I see the hands of people in their first year? Wow. That's great, man. That is just great. If you're anything like me, you're looking around the room right now and you're saying, Alcoholics Anonymous. How lame is this? How did I wind up in Alcoholics Anonymous? I mean, I'm a major guy. What? Alcohol, this is lamer than church, this is lamer than synagogue, this is beyond any plateau of lameness I ever imagined available to me. Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome. You're now privy to an unending reservoir of information and advice. We're going to talk some stuff to you. We don't care if you want us to talk the stuff to you. We're going to talk the stuff to you. And if you're anything like me, you see the kind of bully I am is I'm a nice guy. I'm a sterling human being. That's my first shot. Out of the gate, I'm a nice guy. Then if you don't do what I want you to do, you should die in a flaming car crash. But my first shot is nice guy. So if you're anything like me and you're in that first year, people are talking to you and you're grinning and you're nodding and you're praying that their face burst into flame. That they just go up in a column of smoke and leave me alone. Because I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I could not believe it. I had a very unpleasant journey to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was brought up to a completely insane family in a section of New York City called the Bronx. My family was completely out of their mind. It was a lower middle class Jewish family in the Bronx, and my wife never believed me about how crazy my family was until my mom threw an engagement party for us, and my aunt wore her wig backwards, and it had a bun on it. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a look she was going after. Nuttier than fruitcakes. My uncle was concerned with anti-Semitism. His name was Isidore Redman. He was concerned. I wish I was lying about this. This is my genetic pool. He was one of the top 10 welterweights of the world during the 30s. He was fighting in Atlanta, Georgia. Concerned about anti-Semitism. He changed his name from Redman to Goldberg so no one would know he was Jewish. The same, oh God, the same, my grandmother, who was clinically psychotic and attempted suicide on numerous occasions, used to make my clothing for my brother and I. And we put this clothing on made by an ambulatory schizophrenic. We put the clothing on and we look at each other and go, oh my God! And my mother would say, would I let you leave this house if you didn't look gorgeous? And when we were about 12, we looked at each other and said, we look like we're from Mars, man. I mean, this is why no one will talk to us. If you got something for free in my family, it meant it was stolen. And my uncle, whose wife made the wig boo-boo, he was a welder and he got free bales of steel wool. And she took a decorating course and made throw pillows and filled all the pillows with steel wool. Now, after a while, that works its way through on you. So you're in the house and everyone's in a little motion. Everybody's moving. You're standing, you're sitting, you're moving. There's a little English on everybody. Insane. Absolutely out of their minds, and they had not one single solitary thing to do with making me an alcoholic. If you're new here, I got good news for you. They had nothing to do. You see, if they had made me an alcoholic, I guess I could work out my family problems and drink properly. You know, that would have been neat. It just didn't work out that way. See, a lot of people have difficult families. They just don't shoot a quarter grain of heroin in their hip when they get anxious. I don't know what it is. They don't protect their right to vomit. Normal people don't protect their right to vomit. Normal people will do anything to not vomit. So they had absolutely nothing to do with me being an alcoholic. It's a strange catch-22 of Alcoholics Anonymous. It seems that I didn't drink because of my fears, my resentments, or my sexual problems. If I drank because of them, I could go to therapy, work them out, and drink right. I guess. I think I drank because I'm a drunk. I'm an alcoholic. I'm bodily and mentally different from my fellows, although it is my obsession that someday I will drink like a normal person. It is a great obsession of every abnormal drinker that someday he or she will. I drank because I'm a drunk. I have this illness. And I didn't drink because of my resentments, my fears, or my sexual problems, but I will drink again if I don't stay spiritually fit and do something about them. It's a weird deal, newcomers. Don't bother with it now. You got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. My father, when I was a kid, thought he was a loser, and I completely agreed with him. I thought he was a sucker and a sap, and my dad never made more than $10,000 a year. My brother and I never went to school with ripped clothing, and we never missed a meal. My last year out there, I made $80,000. My children did go to school with ripped clothing, and they did miss meals. How had my father become a loser? How had that happened? He had become a loser because I'm a man with alcoholic tendencies, and a certain kind of thinking had become established in me that had placed me beyond human help. And new people, it's a remarkable thing. You're going to hear this a lot, that this is a threefold illness. It seems to attack us on the physical level, on the mental level, and on the spiritual level. And the physical level, if you get a chance, please do read our doctor's opinion. Please read that in the book. It's a remarkable document. And he talks about alcoholics drinking to overcome a craving that's beyond their control. And if you get a chance, if you don't relate to that, if you can't relate to having little or no control over how much you drink after you start to drink, take a look at the thinking a little bit. You might want to take a look at the thinking. There's some great stuff about the thinking in chapters 2 and 3. My home group, just before I left here, a guy shared about his bottom at this group. It was just one of the most beautiful pieces of alcoholic thinking I'd ever heard. He hit his bottom. He was chained to a bench in a police station. He had just wet himself. And out loud in front of these police, he said, I got to stop driving. I gotta quit driving. If you've been getting drunk at exactly the wrong time, if you fail to recall with sufficient force the memory of the pain and humiliation of a day, a week, a second ago, and repeat the same insane behavior over and over and over again, if you build up a bright outlook for yourself and your family and rip it down around your ears in a senseless series of sprees, you could have alcoholism. If you don't, what's wrong with you? What's your problem? Consider the alternatives. You might want to get alcoholism. Now, I told you my dad was a loser, so I set some pretty lofty goals for myself as a young man. And by the time I got to AA, I had reached or surpassed them all. By the time I got sober, I had a book on the bestseller list. I had acted in a Broadway play. I directed a movie. I directed a TV show. I had my own theater in New York. I'd done all of these things a ton. I never got to do any of them more than once. Because when I'd leave, they'd move the business. So I couldn't find them again. Now, when I took the X-ray of my disease, and there's only one X-ray alcoholism I know of. If you have certain other diseases, they give you blood test X-rays. They do all sorts of stuff. If you have alcoholism, we take an inventory. It seems to be the picture of our illness. And sometimes guys I work with, you know, they get feeling creepy and they see it and they ask me, can I come over and just read you what I've done? And just for me, I encourage them not to. I encourage them to do the whole thing, to take a look at the whole mess, to take a look at the scope of what they have done. Because if they do, they might be so crushed under the weight of it that they might experience a deflation of ego at depth sufficient enough to stick around here. And it is a rare thing and a remarkable thing when a man actually does. Now, when I took that extremely unpleasant inventory that my sadistic sponsor suggested that I take, I saw that early on, people were doing things behind my back. A little later on, they started talking behind my back. And in the last few years, they started thinking behind my back. And that's terrible. It's terrible. It's hard to catch them. But you can catch them. You can get them. You got to accuse them of it all the time. You'll get them. You'll get them. And that's what was happening to me. People were being just horrible to me. And you know that terrible feeling you work in someplace 2 weeks and they start blaming each other for having hired you? Isn't that the worst? You know, you brought them. No, you brought them. No, it was your idea. And they're trying to bail out having been the guy to bring you in there, you know? Terrible, terrible thing. I ended psychotherapy at the age of 14. I was in therapy for 18 years. And and I was on the brink of being a very well-analyzed corpse by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to be dead with no Oedipal conflict at all. I was no Oedipal conflict, dead. Very healthy, very dead. Now, if you're new here, I want to tell you, I am not putting therapy down. I have no opinions on outside interests. On page 133 of our book, it says, if you need a doctor, get one. As a treatment for alcoholism, it was worse than useless for me. It was dangerous. I thought I was treating my alcoholism and I was dying. And I was doing good work in therapy. And I was dying. I mean, that is so... You know when your life is a handful of water running out between your fingers over and over and over again. And I am telling you, I am not putting down psychotherapy. It would be foolhardy to do it for me. As a treatment for alcoholism, it was... I almost died because of it. You know, and not because of it, because of the choice that I made. I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk, and I was victorious over alcohol with marijuana. You don't want to stay on marijuana too long? Wow. What? Wow. What? It comes and it goes, you know. Kick marijuana. with pills. I was victorious over pills with LSD. Played with a headless doll under a black light for about a year. Kicked that LSD with cocaine. Great drug, cocaine. Good for sex if you enjoy sex from the Neolithic period. Great stuff. But you don't want to do cocaine too long, so I started taking heroin, and you don't want to do that so long it's antisocial. So I drank. And I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk. And that's what I did. And I had alcoholism, and I didn't know it. I absolutely didn't know it. I swapped addictions. I stayed okay. I stayed in therapy. My father was a sap. I wasn't. And I moved on with the business of life. I was introduced to an Old Testament God that I wouldn't be caught in a dark alley with. Man, this guy got you. He got you. He got you. He followed you. He got you. He killed your goat and turned your wife to salt and put a finger in your eye, and he got you. No matter what. You had to learn a foreign language to talk to him? Wasn't interested. I was a hip, slick, cool kid in the Bronx in New York City stealing cars. I'm going to Hebrew school. My Hebrew name was Shlomo. I wanted a Shlomo-ectomy immediately. Matter of fact, when Bruce asked me to come at her, I thought you guys were having a Jew hunt or something, and you have 18 holes of golf, a 10K run, and a Jew hunt, and that's why I was coming out. I mean, what's that? How does a Jewish kid from the Bronx wind up in Omaha, Nebraska, talking about alcoholism? We are people who might not normally mix. I don't know. Call me a nut. And I wanted to have nothing to do with God or religion or any of that stuff. And when I was about 17, a little older than that, I got loaded. And it's important to me, and I don't mean to offend anybody in my story about includes drugs. It's necessary for me to tell it because it's an important part of what happened to me. I have alcoholism, a bad case of it. I got it from you. If you knew, they'll tell you you can't catch it. They're lying to you. I didn't have it when I got here. I've got a miserable case of alcoholism today. But I used hypodermic needles. I was stoned on heroin, and my father had a massive stroke, and I went to the hospital, and I couldn't be there for him. I couldn't be there for my mother or my brother. I felt like a pig, an animal. I had holes in my arms. I was loaded one more time. The curtain was down, and I was unavailable. I never had felt that horrible about myself, about my lot in life, and what I had become. So I swore I'd never put a needle in my arm again, and I didn't. Drank till I didn't want to be a drunk. Snorted drugs till I didn't want to. Smoked pot till I didn't want to be a pothead, and drank till I didn't want to be a drunk. Shortly after this time, I met a remarkable woman, an incredible, intelligent, beautiful woman. If you wrote down everything I did in a book in 8 years of marriage and gave it to this woman and had her read it and said, would you live with this? She'd say, no, who would live with this? But you stretch it out over 8 years, throw in a best-selling book, throw in a movie, throw in chronic success, throw in the fact that when I started the walk to the drink, I was quite often telling the truth. By the time I got here, it was a little murky. By the time I got to the drink, it was an out-and-out lie. But quite often, when I left the house, I was telling the truth. Yeah, you'd live with it. It'll chip away at you. You hear sometimes people are attracted to damaged people. I've always been attracted to healthy people, and then I screw them up. My wife got sick from prolonged exposure to me. And my children, we had 2 sons who became grievously ill from alcoholism. By the time I got sober, my older son was making involuntary clicking noises with his throat. He was reading years below his grade level, writing years below his grade level. He was terrified. He was cut off from the society of other children. My wife and I kind of are in and out of this. He was kind of functionally retarded. He started special ed, and his small motor stuff was. He was in horrible shape. My wife was relating this the other day. She was at a McDonald's with Mike. This is, when I was still sick. And Mike walked up to a table of complete strangers and said, my dad's an alcoholic and my mom has cancer. Fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. The fabric of our lives is shot through with it, and how horribly true for the young people who are exposed to alcoholism. Nothing ever wound up the way it was supposed to wind up, no matter what, because I was going to get to the drink, no matter what, every time. I don't care who you were. I don't care what you were. If you got in between me and the drink or what I wanted, I'd walk through you, I'd walk around you, but I would get it. Rest assured, I would get it. And I want to tell you, when I take a drink of alcohol, I go down to the middle of my bone, the part that makes red blood cells. Normal people don't do that when they take a drink of alcohol. They don't experience the physical and mental release I experience when I take a drink. Their drink doesn't go boom. My drink goes boom. The boys became terribly ill. And 13 years went by and I didn't stick a needle in my arm. I went to therapy. The careers came and went. Everybody in the home became sicker and sicker. Nancy and I became so sick together. A guy lent us his car and we sold it. He lent us his car and we sold the car. I'll never forget the guy's voice on the phone. He said, "You sold my car?" That's like house sitting for somebody. They come back and you're in escrow, and you've done. We did the right thing. We did the right thing. It says in our doctor's opinion, the alcoholic life will become the only normal one. We didn't have rent. I looked into my wife's eyes. I said, "Honey, let's do the right thing. I'm sick of acting like a kid and borrowing money. Let's sell the car." And she looked at me and said, "Sweetheart, you're right. Let's do it." One night I came home. We had these 32-ounce tumblers in the house, and I popped a cork on a bottle of wine. I emptied the whole bottle of wine into the cup. And I looked around, and Nancy was looking at me like this. I said, "What?" She said, "What are you doing?" And completely seriously, I looked into her eyes, and I said, "I'm having a glass of wine." Can't a man have a glass of wine in his own home? We took a belated honeymoon to Italy. I was working at a restaurant at the time, and I had to steal a lot of money because I didn't want to be a loser. Wasn't going to let them take advantage of me like they did to my dad, pay me an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. So I stole a bunch of dough, and we went to Italy, and we were on a lake in the Alps, medieval village, pretty amazing. It would be good for a normal person, right? They'd be happy being there. They made cognac right there. Cognac right there, so it's a couple of bucks a fifth. So I was drinking a couple of bottles of cognac a day, and after dinner I drank a bottle of cognac, and I looked up, and Nan was looking at me like this, that look. I said, "What?" She said, "What are you doing?" And again, completely seriously, I said, "Sweetheart, this is fresh. They make this right here. They make this cognac right across the hill. It hasn't had time to develop the alcohol content that the stuff in the States. I thought the boat ride screwed it up, right?" And she threw her hands up and said, "What an idiot." And I looked at her walking away and said, "What a moron." And we had no respect for each other. And sometime after this, 13 years after my father died, I was confronted with a situation. I put a needle in my arm. And I crossed the line I swore I'd never cross again. And I called my therapist at that date. It was a new therapist, a Jungian therapist, which I was to learn later on was going to be quite meaningful to me once I read our book. And I told that therapist what I had done, and he said, "There's absolutely nothing that can be done for you." I said, "What?" He said, "I can't do a thing for you, pal. The only thing I can suggest is that you attend a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, or we have you institutionalized." Now, on most other mornings, the institution would have been just fine for me. It would have been a chance to meet more adventurous and colorful people, the kinds of people I was used to associating with. I mean, near the end for me, I got excited when they told me I needed dental surgery. Because that's an uninterrupted source of drugs for a period of time. Normal people don't get excited when they're told they need dental surgery. And there's a few people here smiling. You don't get that at the Rotary, by the way. Right? You know you're at an AA meeting when you see people going, dental surgery. No heads bob up at the Lions Club for dental surgery, guys. I don't know why I went to that AA meeting, but I did. I went to that AA meeting. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, put on my best clothes, went down there with a bad check to write you. Pee in a cup. You know, no one let me pee in a cup that day. And went to get on the mailing list. And I went to that first meeting, and I just kept looking around and saying to myself, Alcoholics Anonymous. How the hell did I wind up at Alcoholics Anonymous? I couldn't believe it. You know, everyone I thought, had one tooth and it had a cavity in it, I mean, do you want what we've got? I couldn't believe it. It was beyond me that I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I was out of plans. If you're new here, I pray for you that you're out of plans. I hope you're out of plans. If you're not, if you have a plan, it's probably a beaut. And tell us the plan. We want to know the plan. Grab one of us and share the plan with us. Don't use the plan. I was out of plans. And my first prayer in Alcoholics Anonymous, I used to raise my hand with less than 30 days with a bunch of guys, and my first prayer was that they'd drink. I wanted to win. Thought you got a set of dishes or something, if you were the last guy. Unbelievably sick. And I stuck around here for 6 months, worked step nun, and got the gift of step nun. And newcomers, if you want to find out what we're going to do to you, you can. Read the 7th chapter of our book, a sadistic chapter, and we're going to do it to you anyway. It says, get a man while he's down. Down at the bottom, the worst he's ever been, crushed up. Get him coming right off that bender. Talk to him. Get him to identify with you. Get him to laugh with you. Get him to cry with you. And once you got him identifying with you, heap upon him evidence as to the hopelessness of his situation. Always good news for the new man. Then it says, stress the spiritual angle freely. Always good news for the new man. Some people say, well, don't talk about God too much at first. You might scare him away. I'm always wondering where we're scaring them to. I don't know where the heck they're going when they run out of here. But it says you can stress the spiritual angle freely. But I was 6 months sober. I was nuttier than a fruitcake. I didn't know that I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. Untreated alcoholism is an ugly thing. I find it particularly unattractive in people who aren't drinking. Because they're not treating it with anything. At least the drunks, they're drinking. They're treating their alcoholism with a drink. It works. It kills you, but it works. It's a treatment. But when you're not drinking and you're not treating your alcoholism, you can tell the guy, that you can find them at the meetings that they've got a vein on their head pumping like a garden hose usually. You can count all the tendons in their neck. They leave a stream of light when they walk, You can pick them out pretty quick. They're getting all that inventory practice in. When they finally take their own, they'll just zip through the sucker because they've gotten so much practice in. And I was out of my mind. I didn't know I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. My family was still sick. I was sick. The phone calls stopped and some stuff cooled off. I thought I had worked the first 3 steps. Well, the third step in our book says it'll have little permanent or lasting effect unless immediately followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the stuff that's been blocking us. By the way, I'm going to talk about our book a lot tonight, newcomers, and I'm not saying it, I just want to let you know this stuff's in there. I don't expect you to remember it or remember the page. I just want to let you know that it's in there. I just want to let you know this is not my idea. I want to let you know that there's a concrete program of action. Nobody is going to take you into a room with a chicken foot and a black robe and wave it on your head. There is a concrete, specific set of directions and a plan of action for living that works. And I was out of my mind, man. And that third step's going to kind of come and go. I can't really have it in my life. I haven't done the rest of the work. So what I had done, I had admitted I was an alcoholic. That's a fatal illness. I admitted my life was unmanageable, and that I needed to be restored to sanity. Not that I would be, but that I needed to be. That I came to believe that I could be. So I had admitted I was dying, my life stunk, and I was out of my mind. How come I didn't feel any better? Why should I have felt any better? There's no reason why I should have felt any better after a period of time. So I found a guy, and this guy was happy a lot of the time. He talked about God, and he didn't sound like a sap to me. And I watched this guy real carefully. I met him when I was 6 days sober. And I asked him to sponsor me. And he asked me to his house, and he sat down, and he showed me the work in that book, and all hell broke loose. You guys said this is one drunk talking to another. I was never impressed with that. I've been talking to drunks my whole life. Not much good had ever come of it. What you meant is that if I could come into contact with someone in whom my problem had been solved, well, that was something. That was something. And that day, that man addressed every problem I have ever had, every problem I will ever have. That day, he addressed my hatred of myself, my hatred of you, my crippling fears, and my unsolvable sexual problems. That day, in that room, he addressed the whole thing. Now, you hear sometimes from people, and I'm sure it's true from them, that they resented themselves more than others. I hated you way more than I hated me. I hated me good. I hated you gooder. I mean, I really hated you. You know, I'm not a suicide guy. I'm a homicide guy. I vastly prefer your death to mine. I'll take you dead more than me dead any day. And if I kill you all, there'll be no reason to commit suicide, so I'll be fine. So he addressed all that stuff right there that day, and I went ahead and I did that fourth step. And by the time I was 9 months sober, I sat down and I did that fifth step. And I tell you, first of all, my sponsor is so loving and so wonderful. When I came over that day for him to show me the work, he let me explain the program to him. He sat there with that tired look in his eyes with a little grin, knowing I was just about going to get it, you know. And he knew I was just a fish flopping around on the deck, that it was my final chance to be, an authority on anything. It was really quite wonderful of him. And when I came over to do the fifth step, I swear to you, I thought I was going to present him with this well-written document, and he'd go off and read it, and then he would come back and comment on it. And if I knew that I had to write, was going to have to read this, I would not have written that much. If I knew that, if I had realized that I was going to have to read all this stuff to the guy. So I read it, and I did 6 and 7, which I'm going to talk more about tonight, which have kind of become my working, my template, my working format for my relationship with God. And then I went to do my 8-step list. Now, the best reading I have ever heard of the 8th step in my life took place at my home group, which is the North Hollywood Men's Stag. It was done by a guy named Nino. Never seen him since. I had never seen him before. He was wearing hospital plastic on his wrist. He had been brought with a group. Heavy New York accent, Italian guy. Had never read chapter 5 before. And he's reading chapter 5. He's reading the 12 steps. And he says, Step 8. Made a list of all those we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Jesus Christ! And he looked out to the group as if to say, have you guys seen this? Do you know what's in here? And I have never forgotten it because it was so pure. It was exactly what happened to me. When I looked at that step, I went, no, not those people, that money. I wouldn't have taken that much money. You're out of your mind. Oh, man. I couldn't believe it. And Nino, it was on his face. You know, it was amazing. Oh, God. So I came to do my 8-step list, and I said, I don't want to put my dad down there. He's dead. There's nothing I can do about that. My sponsor said, do you owe him an amends? I said, yeah. He said, well, you should put him down. Put him down and do your job. Do your job in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just do your job, pal. And I did. I wanted what he had, and then I had the unfortunate experience of finding out how he got it. Guy never said no. He never said no. He just kept doing stuff. He just kept sponsoring guys. He just kept, he listened to guys. I would be in a coma. He went to prisons. He went to hospitals and institutions, and I did what he did. I started doing what he did, and I had fancied myself a show business big shot, and about a year into sobriety, I was hired to direct a situation comedy, and I had a ghostwriting job up to that point for a major movie studio, and I almost drank. I went to a company picnic to get a job, and I almost drank, and I came home, and I called my sponsor, and I told him what happened, and he said, well, I guess you just didn't go there to bring a thing, did you? You went there to take something. And in discussion with him, I realized I had no idea how to do that. I said, Father, this too. Yes, this too. And a couple of months later, I wound up cooking on a catering truck. And I said, Father, I didn't mean this. Hey! But you go to meetings, and you hear guys say stuff like, I prayed for more money and God gave me overtime. No, that's not what I meant. Oh, man. Now, when they make movies in Los Angeles, or pretty much anywhere in the country, when you make a movie or a TV show, they hire a caterer. They hire a caterer on a catering truck, and he goes around. So my first, now these guys make a lot of dough. This is a good job, man. It's a union job. It's a Teamster job. You're driving a vehicle on a movie set. You're making a lot of dough. But I'm Scott Redmond. So I had my first catering job. When I get out there, I'm catering a movie, and the star and the producer winds up being a guy who I've worked with in the industry. And he sticks his head, everybody's setting up the shots there, and he sticks out his head on the catering truck that morning, and he says, can I have a burrito? Scott? And I said, what's happening, man? Hey, man, what's happening? He said, well, what, is this your truck? I said, no, but it's my spatula. I came home, I called my sponsor. I couldn't believe it. This is the gift, huh? We're getting the gift now. How many more gifts you got for me, pal? He said, my. Sounds like you got a little resentment there. Now, in my AA family, we all do it different. Please don't take my program as an indictment of yours. This is just my story about how I've been relieved. But in my AA family, what we encourage each other to do is when we do a 10-step, we do it written like we do the fourth. It's a little quick hit, but it seems to be, for us, a nice way to humble ourselves, to get to the exact causes and conditions of our discomfort. So I sat down and I wrote, I am resentful. It's Scott for being a caterer. It affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, little knock in the crotch there, sex. Little ego blow, 5-bagger. Now, that's a resentment against myself. Now, new people, if you take a look at our 5th chapter, which talks about, it's interesting, our 4th chapter kind of talks about the spiritual malady and the necessity for a spiritual solution to this disease. And then the 5th chapter actually tells you what the disease, what it's made of, and what to start doing about it. It's really quite remarkable. And I had to go a little further. I had this resentment, but what can I ask God to do for me? I have to ask Him to remove certain things in me that are killing me. The job's not killing me. What's killing me? What are the defects of character in me that if God would remove, the resentment would be gone? What poison is it in me that if God comes down, blue skies, magic wand, touches me on the head, it's gone and I'm okay? Well, I got false pride. Right? I'm ungrateful. Guys don't work when they get sober. I'm working, man. I'm making $1. I'm feeding my family. I'm grandiose. How could a man of my caliber possibly be working on a kitchen truck? I'm a retaliator against myself. I have low self-esteem. I'm judgmental. I'm judging myself. I'm not trusting in God. I'm playing God. Right? Things are not going along the Scott Redmond program, a fabulous program. That's one drunk talking to himself. That's the Scott Redmond program. That's life without sponsorship, by the way, folks. One drunk talking to himself. Boy, what a shock that is, right? And I'm impatient. Things aren't moving along like they should. I had to write that resentment. I had to write a resentment against the guy. For what? Being hungry? The guy saw me on the kitchen truck. The guy didn't rub it in. He was a sweet guy. I resented him for seeing me on the kitchen truck, and I resented fate for putting me on the kitchen truck. Now, I just want to tell you, this is just for me. I came into AA, and I heard people talking about God getting them parking spaces, taking parking spaces away. God was getting them into relationships, getting them out of relationships. God was dashing around town, screwing their day up. He was giving them good meals, bad meals. And I said, oh no, oh no. What if God's getting me parking spaces? If He is, someday He's going to screw up in the parking area. What happens to me then? I've got to get a God not involved in parking, and I've got to do it quick. Just for me. This is just for me. So when I went to God in 6 and 7, I had to say, Father, please take this stuff away. And I had to ask the biggest question I've ever asked in Alcoholics Anonymous, and ever will ask in Alcoholics Anonymous. What can I do for you? What can I do for you, Father? And then the third step starts working for me. Otherwise, I'm saying, Father, I'm yours. He says, yeah. Thank you. I'm God. I had a feeling you were mine. I'm God. This is my deal. But it's an awful nice gesture, and I really appreciate it. I go, oh, no. Take this. Take this. Take this low self-esteem. Take this retaliation, this judgmentalness. Take this playing God. Take this, what do you want me to do? And I wait for an answer. And on the bottom of page 69, one of our sections on meditation, it says, the right answers will come if we want them, not if we like them. It says, if we want them. And that's what started happening for me. And a little later on, I got offered this kind of opportunity to get a big-time writing job, and boy, I went nuts over this. I wanted this writing job I really wanted it. And I crashed and burned before I even heard from these people. I did this demo tape for them. Big public relations company in New York, Ketchum Public Relations. And I did a 10-step before I even heard. My mind reading skills, I went nuts. I bottomed out on it. I wrote the 10-step. I read it to my sponsor. I humbled myself, and I got straight. And then a couple of days later, the phone rings. I hear from Ketchum Public Relations, I don't have the job. Phone rings again. Can you go cater this commercial? I said, yeah. I got in the kitchen truck. I get up to Lake Arrowhead near L.A., and who's the commercial for? Yeah, Ketchum Public Relations. I can't believe it. Not only is it for Ketchum Public Relations, but they're making a videotape of the making of the commercial. So they're taping my humiliation. They're going to send it to New York, and the guys in New York are going to go, is that Scott Redmond with the meatloaf there? Is that... Oh, the poor guy. We should have given him some. Look at that. I'm completely nuts. I call my sponsor. I'm frothing at the mouth, and he says, well, I guess God had enough directors, and he needed a few cooks today. You son of a bitch. I said this to myself. Well, it made his week. Made his week. And I had to write about it again, and I had to keep on writing about it. I had to keep on writing about it until I found a way to let God in. And it's an incredible thing. When we take a look at our sections on 6 and 7 in the Big Book, it's the shortest section on any of the steps except for 1 and 2, which there's no section on. It says, we go over the first 5 propositions in the book, and we ask ourselves, are we trying to make mortar without sand? Have we done it completely? Now, if this grandiosity is killing me, and it won't go away, and every catering job I'm going out on, it's kicking my butt, and I can't do what my sponsor has asked me to do, which is give them a dime for their nickel, right? How can I let God in? I got to go back. What is it? Is it step 1? Am I not really admitting I'm powerless over this? Is it step 2? Have I not really come to believe that God will restore me to sanity here? Am I not giving him my grandiosity because I don't think he's big enough to handle it? And if my God is not big enough, how can I make him bigger? What service is it? What stone have I not turned over? What can I do, Father? What can I do to make you bigger? And my sponsor would say to me, my God's big, you use him. You use my God until your God's big enough. And I did it until my God was big enough. Or is it step 3? Have I really not made my decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God in this area? Or is it more inventory in this area? Do I have some resentments against myself or some fears or some stuff that I haven't? Have I not gotten everything? You know how a dentist works. They get all the decay out of there. Have I not really done it? So 6 and 7 have been my trip back to the first 5 over and over and over again. And as a result, my life and my program and my God have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. The road has not gotten narrower for me. There's very few places in the world I can't go today, and there was almost no place I could go. My life had become so horribly small. Our book talks about the great reality, the broad highway. Things have just gotten bigger and bigger, and something that we like to talk about in my AA family too. The more juice I can actually get from the good fortune of another man, how much bigger does my life get? As opposed to the jealousy and the sickness of heart, the cancer of the soul that the spiritual illness of alcoholism is. When I was new here, I kept saying to myself, I haven't hurt my children. At least I have not hurt my children. And a couple of weeks into the program, I was on the phone with the first guy who gave me the program, who I was talking to about every day. And out of nowhere, it hit me that several weeks before, I was hungover. I was with my older child. We were swimming, and I got sick in front of him. And he got sick in response. And the horrible, crushing reality that morning was the truth. That the only reason my son had become ill was because he was with his father. Not because he had a virus, not because he had eaten bad food, not because he was sick, because he was with his father. If he had not been with his father, he would not have gotten sick. And it crushed me. It crushed me. And it helped me stay around here a little longer. And if you're new here, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And if this stuff plagues you, and in some of our literature it talks about our co-founder, Bill Wilson, that he'd be overwhelmed with remorse, and he'd go back to the hospital where he got better, and he'd work with some new men, and after having worked with them, he'd leave happy again. One of the guys I used to sponsor did something I could have done on several thousands of evenings. He drank a couple of beers, got into a vehicle, had poor judgment, and killed a child. How many thousands of evenings did I have a couple of beers in me and drive? And had a little judgment a little off. Thousands of evenings. His family, you see, he didn't get it. You know, in our chapter to the family afterward, it says we don't close the door on our dark past. Once it's in God's hands, and how do we put it in God's hands? With this work. Otherwise it can just be bragging or self-pity. Self-pity is a great drug. If we could bottle it, we'd knock crack right off the market, man. I'll tell you. It's a moose. He didn't get, he said, with it we can help others avert death and misery. That's a pretty remarkable thing, a pretty incredible job. All right? He didn't understand that if he stayed in AA, he could help men I cannot help. He could look into the eyes of a man who has taken a life of a kid and say, yes, you too. You too. I don't kill children anymore. You too. This is for you too. And we can move forward, and you can become useful, and you can live a whole and useful and comfortable life. He became so sick, and his family had become so sick. And I just, this is for me, and I need to say it because it means so much to me. When I came into AA, I found some things rather confusing. One of the things I found very confusing was when I heard jokes about Al-Anon. I found it confusing, and I found it very hurtful to me because I was so proud of my wife for reaching out and getting her own miracle. I so respected her. I so admired her for what she was doing. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just talking about for me. I found after a period of time that the guys who were making the jokes had very little knowledge of Al-Anon. I think I'm being kind. That I thought, geez, isn't this something we're supposed to want? Isn't this something we're supposed to be moving toward? So I found it kind of confusing and hurtful at the time. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is this man's wife she was not an alcoholic, but had become so grievously ill from alcoholism. You know, when you kill somebody, they had a criminal case and then they have a civil suit. And this guy was a laborer. He didn't have any dough, but they had $1 million judgment against him. on the civil suit. They do that automatically. Her only reaction to the civil suit was, why play the lottery? If we win, we'll just have to give it to them. This is the cancer of the soul. This is the tapeworm that leaves people who are suffering from alcoholism hollow inside. This is how we come to this program, you know. Sponsorship has been a pretty remarkable thing for me. You know, another thing I heard that did kind of confuse me when I came in was people saying, I choose to stay sober today. And I said, wow, let's get on top of that one quick here. Choose to stay sober today. Let's have a drink tomorrow. And what am I doing Saturday? I've lost the power of choice with drink. I don't get to choose to stay sober any day. I've crossed an invisible line past which there's no freedom of choice. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Driven is not nudged or influenced. Driven implies under the lash of. Driven. It owns me. And I have spent my entire life rearranging my life so that I can accommodate alcoholism. I didn't know that the sobriety process was a process of rearranging my entire life to accommodate sobriety. And sponsorship has been alternately, and we heard some great speakers this afternoon talk about it. Rob and I were talking about it on the way up. You have guys you sponsor who call you up with announcements. I'm getting married or I'm moving, and it's like sponsoring a copy of People magazine. No research, just headlines. All you're getting is the headline. And I'm not going to make the decision about the guy, but it's one drunk talking to himself, man. It's a tough one. And the guys who I sponsored who were dead today, they didn't choose to drink. They started working step none, and they became spiritually unfit, and they died. And I miss them. When I told them I loved them, I meant it. Better you than me. Yeah, fine, but I meant it when I told them I loved them. My kids miss them. At any rate, when I was about a year sober, I was online to buy some lunch, and this guy was in front of me online, and he was buying like a can of Colt 45 with, loose change and lint, and a half-eaten milk dud, He had been there for a year, And he turned around and he looked at me, and instead of in my best Bronx saying, "What are you looking at?" I said, "How you doing?" He said, "You don't know how I'm doing. Nobody knows how I'm doing except for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous." So we went outside and we talked. We exchanged numbers, and that night I went on my first real 12-step call. I got a guy with more time than me. We called the city agency in L.A., and they said, take him down to County General Hospital. That's County General's our war zone. It's we got a USC alumni here tonight. He knows what it is. It's a pretty tough deal. But they said, take him down and dump him off at the door. Don't go in with him, because don't show them that he's got friends or some money, or just dump him at the door and book. We went through the whole deal with him. Well, I don't know why. We went inside. We went through all the way up to the alcoholic ward with the guy. And about halfway through, he turns to us and he says, "I feel like I'm dying." And the guy I'm with says, "That's because you are." And I said, what a terrible thing to say to this guy. What a cold, insensitive, awful thing to say to this guy. Now, the guy is in a county facility. He's been told to lie that he's got blood in his urine to break his way into an alcoholic ward. What's the guy supposed to say? You're just having a bad day? Just a bad day. Just don't worry about it. No. This is what dying feels like. I'll let you know when you're having a bad day. This isn't it. You're in no danger of having a bad day, pal. You're dying. If you stick around here for any appreciable amount of time, you will see men and women come into this program with bottoms that will make your hair stand on end. You will look at that man or woman and you will say they could never drink again. How could they ever drink again with what they've been through? And after a period of time, if they do not treat their alcoholism with the program of action outlined in that book, it won't be their bottom anymore. It'll be a bad day. It'll be a period of time where people will be being particularly unkind to them and thinking behind their back. And they'll move on with the business of dying, and you can see them share their way right out of the program. You see them share the untreated alcoholism. They get nuttier and nuttier week after week, and they share their way right out the door. In Dr. Silkworth's section of our book, he talks about something I have always found amazing. This is a non-alcoholic. This is an administrator of one of the biggest, most prestigious hospitals for the treatment of alcoholism and drug addiction in the United States. And he writes a chapter of a book endorsing a non-profit, non-money-making, altruistic, spiritual society that he's not going to make $1 from. And he says, in the chapter, he says, if you think that's crazy, if you say, why would we do this? Come with us. Come work with us. See the children. See the warped lives. See the smashed families. And if you stay here, you will hear the sound of a man or a woman who wants to get sober and who can't. It is, to me, the most horrible sound in the world. I hope it never stops making me feel the way it makes me feel. And if I stop doing this work, I won't have to worry about it because I won't be hearing it. I won't be around it. You know. Sometime after this, one of the guys I sponsor called me up and said, look, stop talking to me about the steps, and if you can work it into your busy schedule, die, and leave me alone. Take a hike, pal. And he then proceeded to rip some people off in a program. He stole a bunch of money, stole a car, ripped off an apartment. He was making me look pretty bad. Pretty bad. I wanted to talk to him. Wanted to explain a few things to him. My sponsor said, nah, I don't think so. Nah, he said, maybe you should write a resentment. You've so frightfully abused your opinion of other people, you've lost the right to tell them where they stand in the universe. Now, I can tell you what I need, stand up for myself if I don't play God with you, but I don't get to tell you where you stand in the universe anymore. Darn it. So I wrote that resentment. I am resentful at blank for ripping people off in AA and making me look bad. Affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, and sex. Another little knock in the crotch there, a little ego blow. 5-bagger again. What are the defects in me that if God were to remove the resentment would be gone? I'm a retaliator and judgmental. Don't have to open my mouth. Do it right here. You know when the head hits the pillow and it becomes a rotisserie? I'm judgmental. I'm a retaliator. I'm playing God. Spiritual pride, new one. Didn't get that till I came to AA and became a spiritual Goliath. How could a man comport himself thusly after coming into contact with a man of my spiritual caliber? I just don't get it. Oh. You know, selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking are kind of the same, but they're a little different. And I like to get as specific as possible when I go to God with these problems. Selfish is kind of wanting it all for me. Self-centered is kind of figuring it's all about me. And self-seeking is kind of trying to figure out what's in it for me. And here, I think it's probably self-seeking because I care kind of more about how people are looking at me than what this guy's going through. It's not about, I'm not dying from alcoholism. This guy is false pride, spiritual pride. And here's the deal. This guy's spiritually sick. Now, it says in our book, if I can accept the fact that a man's spiritually sick, I'd show him the same tolerance, pity, and patience I'd cheerfully grant a sick friend. I certainly wouldn't want to fillet him like I wanted to. Debone the drunk. So I'm clearly, one of my defects has got to be unwillingness to accept the fact that another child of God could be spiritually sick like me. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm a hypocrite. So I took this to God and I prayed about it. I read it to my sponsor. Sometime after this guy found out that he had a fatal illness. And he called a city agency and they said, we'll take you down to County General and we'll dump you at the door. I knew that that wasn't true because I had done my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew I didn't have to dump him at the door. He couldn't call anybody else because I guess he had burnt them out or they had told him what they thought of him and I hadn't. Because I had done my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got to be there for another man during his death when I couldn't be there for my father. And my father came back into my life and the amends was made and it was lifted from me and I felt his presence again. And I could tell his grandchildren about him. And I could laugh about him. And I knew how incredibly proud he would have been of me. And that horrible place where all it was an ouch and a squint, whenever it came up, was gone. And it was cleared because I had done my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't go out there for that reason. People say sometimes you got to be careful of what you pray for, and I don't think you do if you're praying right. We're not supposed to pray for anything for ourselves, so what do I have to be careful about? You know? if you're new here, I don't know what you're coming in with. I don't know what your deal is. If you've strangled a puppy, we got a guy who strangled 2 puppies. One of the guys I sponsor, he got drunk and got in his car and drove it 17 miles the wrong way on the freeway and drove it off a 100-foot embankment. And I was telling this to my younger son, Jesse, and I said, and he was pronounced dead at the scene, and Jesse said, yeah, and dumb. My children have found an entire class of grown-up who is scared of him, and that's the new guys that come to my house. When Jesse was 8, a guy came over, and Jesse walked up to him and said, what step you working, pal? What step, buddy? He said, 4, I'm here to do 4. I said, he's 8, man. A couple of weeks ago, a guy did a 5th step on Wednesday night. He didn't finish. He came back Thursday night to finish it. He walks in, and Jesse looks up to him and says, what's the matter, dude? Blew it last night? Got to do it again? It's a very tough room. A very tough room. My wife and I no longer work on our relationship. My idea of working on a relationship is to talk to you until you change your mind. Till your eyes roll back up in your head and you go, okay, and you keel over. Right. We've had some financial difficulties in the last month. Unusual in America that we'd be having financial difficulties. And I was getting real uptight about it. This is about 5-6 months ago. And Nancy sat me down and she said, you're perfect for me. You're my guy. And I didn't marry a rich guy. I married you, and I adore you. And you're just exactly perfect for me right now. How bizarre it would be to live the way we lived for so many years. To have a difficult time in the world outside, and then to come home and turn on one another like Dobermans. But when you are each other's problem, that's what you do. What a deranged idea that is. To live in this difficult world and deal with all the difficulties and then come home and make each other miserable. And one of the things I had to jettison as quickly as I possibly could was some insane notion. Let's say my wife was bad with money. She's not. But let's say she was bad with money. Who am I to look at her and say, if you loved me, you'd be good with money? She was bad with money if she was in fact bad with money, which she's not. But if she was bad with... Just took 400 people to get her to admit it. She was bad with it years before she met me. Now, isn't me saying to her, if you love me, you'd be good with money, like saying to a man, if you loved me, you wouldn't drink? There's no difference. It's the same grandiose, insane notion that I can fix this, that I am God. And we're going to celebrate 17 years of marriage this June, and we're having a tremendously successful partnership, a tremendously successful family. So I need to share one other thing about my children. I share it every time I share. My son, who I told you who is virtually functionally retarded, from being frightened. Some years ago I was making my son's lunch. I've been sober for a couple of years. And they had come into contact with someone in whom their problem had been solved. And I said, Mike, what do you want on your hot dog? He said, I want mustard, onions, and lettuce. I said, lettuce? He said, yeah, I don't want lettuce. And he walked away. He came back about 45 minutes later, and he looked at me directly in the eyes, and he said, I will never again allow your opinion of what I want affect what I ask for. So I asked him to sponsor me at that point. Well, what's that? Where is it? We went over to my sponsor's house one day, and Don says to Mike, he says, oh, you've been to play video games? And Mike says, no, the obsession's been lifted, and I didn't have to read anything. If you're new here, I'm not telling you that your family's going to get well and everything's going to be swell if you get sober. I'm telling you that if it happens, you'll be present for the event. I got to do my job in Alcoholics Anonymous no matter what. If I'm on the kitchen truck and both companies that I cooked for wound up asking me to go into business with him. And after that 6 months or 5 months of financial difficulties we had, I turned a really substantial deal for myself the day before we got on the plane to come out here. And here's the miracle. Turning that deal did not make a substantial difference in our house in terms of how people felt, how people were interacting and treating each other. That is remarkable to me. That is more a sign of the direct power of God in my life. You know, and if you're new, don't worry. None of us can fully comprehend or define that power that is God. If you seek Him, if you do this stuff, God's will for me is abundantly clear. And it's very simple for me. My God's will is very simply that I be as free as possible of resentments, fears, and sexual problems so that I can draw close to Him and He will reveal Himself to me. He doesn't care what I'm doing for a living. He's not keeping me and Nancy together or pulling us apart. He's not making my kids, well, in terms of Him sitting up there for me. This is for me. I got to do my job. I've got to do the work. You know. If you're new here, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the only book that is the text on recovery from a fatal illness that contains the sentence, "We absolutely insist on enjoying life." There's no book about malaria that says malaria's a hoot. You'll love malaria. You'll meet other people with malaria. You'll have a great time with them. Then you'll meet people who just got malaria, and that's fabulous. That's like the best it gets. It says in a vision for you, the best years lie ahead. I want that always to be true. So if you're new here, I want to welcome you. I want to tell you that we're going to ask you to do the weirdest thing probably anybody's ever asked you to do, which is when you want to drink, don't. When you want to drink, don't. You can't have sobriety without a spiritual experience. We know you haven't had one yet. Don't drink till you have one. You don't have the thing, the necessary element that is going to get you out of the loop and stop you drinking. But we want you to stick around and not drink. We want you to do this incredibly impossible thing. Don't drink no matter what. Don't drink no matter what. Call one of us. Stop treating your alcoholism. Your treatment doesn't work. It's calamitous. No one has ever gotten better from anything using your treatment. We have a treatment that has worked for millions of people. It takes a little more time than the effects, the immediate effects that we receive from a drink. You know? Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome home. Thanks for letting me share.